Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Ready?
Yep. Let's go. Let's laugh. We are imperfect after all.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Imperfect Us podcast.
I'm Leanne Camilleri.
And I'm Lisa Downs. As hosts of the Imperfect Us podcast, we share relatable stories that celebrate we are all perfectly imperfect humans leading perfectly imperfect lives. We discover practical and evidence-based strategies that draw on the science of wellbeing and positive psychology that help us to uncover the barriers that might hold us back from being our authentic selves and turn them into opportunities so that we can show up more consistently, doing what we really aspire to do and who we want to be.
We acknowledge the Wadawurrung and the Kaurna people as traditional custodians of the beautiful lands on which this podcast is being recorded. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging and extend this respect to other First Nations people who are here with us today. So, let's get started.
Today we are so grateful for the opportunity to speak with the incredible Dr Jodi Richardson. As a psychologist, a physiologist, educator, author and presenter, Dr Jodi shares practical and evidence-based strategies, tools and tips to support parents, children and teachers learn how to best support, manage and minimise anxiety, as well as to maximise people's potential and elevate their mental health and wellbeing. Jodi understands how anxiety can get in the way of living a rich and full life. Yet she is a strong advocate of reminding us that anxiety doesn't have to hinder our opportunities to live a rich and fulfilling life. Jodi lives with her amazing husband, 2 children and 2 border collies. And what you might not know about Jodi is that she recently earned her first Dan black belt in karate. All right, well, let's dive on in. Hello and welcome, Dr. Jodi.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
We're really thrilled to speak with you today to gain some really valuable insights into what anxiety is, how it shows up in our bodies, and how we might be able to understand better ways to thrive more consistently with anxiety in our lives and at work.
Oh, look, I love that you've already highlighted the idea that it shows up in our bodies, because it's often a really overlooked part of anxiety, and there's so much to understand about that helps kind of reduce how frightening anxiety can be for people. So so it's just such a pleasure to have this opportunity to talk with you today.
Oh, thank you. Well, on that, we would really love to know a little bit about maybe what inspired you to do the wonderful work that you do.
Yes, like a lot of people, I'm inspired by my own journey, in that when I look back, I can see that my anxiety that I live with an anxiety disorder, began when I was 4.
Oh.
I was in a class of, a double class of preps. So there were around 53 preps in a double class with 2 teachers, and it was a very stressful environment. And in that environment, I found that the tension and the stress and the yelling that occurred in that classroom was just really rattling for me. And I started to have a sick tummy, which was the beginnings of anxiety, feeling anxious about not wanting to go to school. I guess my brain was detecting that environment as feeling threatening, whereas my home environment was not. And I started with this really upset tummy and would say to my mum, I don't feel well. And of course, I looked well. I didn't have a fever. There was nothing sort of physically wrong with me. So thankfully, I had to keep going to school. But years later, my anxiety wasn't identified until I suffered with depression. And it was after that I left teaching to work for Beyond Blue, and really felt that it's important to me to help other people understand, so that others have a very different experience to what mine was.
Wow.
That's such important work, Jodi. And I think when we have lived and experienced it ourselves, we can connect with people on a much deeper level of understanding and empathy.
Oh, we can. And I think that, well, I actually am told, I guess I say I think, but I am told that the work that I do is quite impactful, because when I'm speaking with audiences, I'm sharing parts of my own journey as an anxious kid and as an anxious adult and as a parent. of kids who, experience anxiety on and off, as everybody does. And so that kind of insider knowledge is really helpful, combined with the professional expertise, so that people can get a little peek behind the curtain. Because some people will say, I just never get anxiety. I don't know what it's like. And I help them also to tap into, everybody experiences it, but not everybody experiences it in a way that really gets in the way of their life.
It's also, I think, enriching that those stories that you tell actually might uncover for some people, maybe that's, they've had a journey of something's going on, but they're not sure what it is. But now they go, maybe it is anxiety. Maybe I need to look into what I can do about that. Is it or not?
Absolutely. Parents on a regular basis might have been at a presentation to learn about supporting their children, and will come up to me after the presentation. And that's why I just love in person. It was just never the same on Zoom.
Yeah.
Because you'd sort of have this really beautiful connection with people and really support them. And then you just turn off your camera and you're just like, okay. But in person, people can come up and say hello. And so many adults, men and women, have said, you have just spent the last 90 minutes kind of telling the story of my life. And now for the first time, I understand myself. I understand that this is something that I've been living with, and now I know that I can go and seek some help. And it's wonderful to hear that, because people have that awareness, but it's also sad that it's 2022 and they're adults in their 40s and 50s who just don't have those insights because they've never learned before.
No.
Or maybe people wanted to acknowledge that they did have anxiety too. Maybe they were frightened of, being vulnerable and sharing those things and keeping it inside, which is sort of sometimes more harmful. But now that there's more conversations happening, it opens that conversation to many more others. Yeah.
Yes.
I think too, the experience can be a bit scary, can't it? And if you don't understand what is happening, you can be thinking, what's wrong with me? Do I want to share that? But when you do finally understand, oh, this is actually anxiety that I'm experiencing, it changes the whole relationship with whatever it is that you're going through at the time.
It really does. And I think sometimes when somebody that we trust is open and vulnerable, it does open the door a little bit more for other people to feel that they can voice it and say something. And that's a first step in just that awareness, and maybe saying it out loud to going, I've seen that you have lived with this your whole life, because I talk about my journey, and that I like to say I thrive with anxiety because I lead such a rich and full life, and the anxiety doesn't. Even like we just come back from a holiday in Surfers Paradise, I did the most terrifying rides. As anxious as I felt, everything in my head was saying, don't, what are you doing? That I don't, for the most part, I really just recognise it. I know how to manage it, and I can get on with living a really full life. And I think when other people see that, they realise, well, I'd like that too. I'd like that too. And if that means getting a little bit of extra support, then you can get on that road as well.
Jodi, anxiety has become a hot topic in many conversations these days, especially after the pandemic. And we'd love if you could explain to us, what is anxiety anyway?
Anxiety is the brain and the body's response in anticipation of a threat. So that's how I define it for people, because we need to discern between actually being in danger, in that if you're on a roller coaster and you're in the midst of something that feels sort of dangerous, that's one thing. But it's the anticipation that brings anxiety to the fore. I'll give you a different example. A family might be walking down the street, going for a walk of an afternoon, and they take a different route, go through a different street, and a dog that is very angry rushes at the fence, and that's fear. Like in that moment, there's a danger. Quickly you realise, thank goodness the dog's on the other side of the fence. You have that fear response in the presence of a clear danger and a clear threat. So the next time that family goes for a walk, if they're approaching that street, anxiety might start to rise in anticipation of what might happen. And the important thing for people to know that I really love to explain is that when we are imagining a threat, or we are perceiving a threat, or we are faced with a potential threat, the brain and the body react in the same way. And so for a young person, my daughter, for example, she loved to do the very dark, narrow tunnels at the local rock climbing centre. And you can buy a glow stick and climb through these tiny tunnels like it's a claustrophobic's nightmare. And the next day she was in bed and she said, "Mum, I can't stop thinking about the tunnels and I'm feeling really scared," was her word. I knew she was feeling anxious because she was imagining being back in that threatening situation. So she was lying in bed, comfortable, safe, full tummy, clean teeth, and yet she was experiencing anxiety as if she was in that situation. So it can be very, very powerful, even when we're just imagining something.
I know when someone tells about speaking on stage, I immediately get a reaction in my body, just thinking, and I'm not even planning to do that, but you know what I mean? Those responses are definitely there. And when you're aware of that feeling, yeah, it's quite incredible.
It really is. And I think it just helps having that understanding of that there is a part of our brain that is always on the lookout for safety and danger. And even if you're imagining something, that alarm is sounded. And I think it's really helpful for those who are listening who might be caring for somebody with anxiety, because it can be really hard to understand and it can seem irrational. And loving, well-meaning parents and carers and teachers can say, "Oh, there's nothing to worry about. You're safe, and yes, it's important for us to be reminded that we are safe, but also it's a very real response. Like you were saying, Lisa, when you just think about something, your whole body can react, and it's as if you are in a dangerous situation.
Yeah. It's funny how our body tricks us a lot, doesn't it?
It's very sensitive, and it's quite awe-inspiring the way that we react. But when we don't understand it, it's frightening and something to be. A lot of people will talk about trying to free themselves of anxiety or get rid of it, but it's actually really protective. It's a very clever response, but if we understand it more, then we're in a better position to sort of cope better and get on with doing the things that we really want to do.
And think of it in a different way, rather than that's, the end of me, to, what can I learn from here and what do I need at this point to go further?
That's right. That's right.
That's the beauty of nature, I think, as much as it's a normal response, is trying to protect us. And I guess we have to work that out, if it is a real threat or not. But also, when anxiety shows up in us, it'll show up in people in different ways. I know for myself, when I experience it in my body, I liken it to like a rush under my skin. And I now understand what that is when that arises. But when I didn't, it was a really scary feeling of what's happening to me. It can be a very liberating aha moment for people to realise, oh, that sick feeling in my stomach, I think that's anxiety. I understand that now. Okay. Now I've got some tools to work with it, or I can find ways to work with it.
Yes, and just on that, it's such a common symptom. And the reason that we feel sick in the tummy, or we can have, feel the need to run to the toilet, have some young people will, well, not just young people, but some kids at school will feel, they've got diarrhea or they need to run to the loo, or some people will feel that they need to vomit. It's all happening because the brain has detected a threat. And we go into fight or flight mode, which most people will have heard of before. But physiologically, our whole body is being prepared to defend ourselves and keep us safe. And so digestion isn't important under those circumstances. So it essentially shuts down, and blood from the gut is shunted to other parts of the body where it's more needed, like the legs for running and the hands and the arms for fighting. And that's why we feel sick. And what happens for some people is when they start to feel sick and they don't have an understanding of what's causing that, then there can start to be some worrying thoughts about, why am I sick? What's wrong with me? Oh, I've got some sort of a terminal illness, something terrible's happening. And that anxiety fuels more anxiety. And that's what can ultimately lead to panic. And so just having that understanding that this feeling has a really good explanation. And that's just one of the many things that change in the body when we feel anxious. It's just, to me, it's just so powerful, because that's when anxiety shows up. You can, like you were saying, Leanne, you know what it feels like for you, and it's different symptoms are stronger for different people. If we know what to look for, we can catch it a little bit earlier as well, and then not get into that spiral, and we can do something else to sort of dial it back. So it's so important.
It's almost like making friends with anxiety, isn't it? Once you're aware of it, befriend them, because it's there to help us understand, is it actually a dangerous situation or something different?
Yes. Well, that's why I called my podcast, Well, Hello, Anxiety, because we do tend to want to run. We want to run. We want to, it's frightening, like most things, when we don't understand them, when they're happening to us and making us feel pretty yuck. And so exactly what you just said, Lisa, if we can sort of turn around and go, well, hello, this is anxiety. This is what anxiety looks like for me. Thank you, brain. I understand you're trying to keep me safe. And of course, we definitely need it when we are in a dangerous situation. We want to be able to tune into those signs and symptoms if we feel like we might be being followed, or if we receive a text that might seem a little bit off. Our brain will detect that threat and will give us some cues to tune into. So it's not always something to manage. It's not all bad. We need it, but understanding it helps us to, like you say, Lisa, to make friends and just go, okay, well, we're going to do life together. I'm in the driver's seat. You're in the boot.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's so funny when you said that. I hadn't really thought about it until you mentioned about, it could be an email, it could be a text message or something. And that exact thing happened with me just recently. I was very busy, very happy, having fun. Opened up my emails, and there was this email that just came across as a bit different and odd. And I had those sensations. Then I reread it and I relaxed, because it wasn't as bad as I thought. But that immediate response was, oh, that I must have somehow done something wrong, which I didn't, and it was all fine. But it was that feeling, that, and knowing your body all the time, how powerful that is once you're aware. And so strange that it's an email, not a verbal, nothing, like it can be in so many different forms.
It really can. It really can. And for you to be able to have that enough awareness to be able to recognise that you've noticed a change, that for some people it's a sinking feeling. For some people it's a cold sweat. For you, Leanne, you feel this sort of rush under your skin. And what happens, which is really interesting for some people in that instance, Lisa, you could connect the trigger with the response. Yeah. A lot of people will feel those physiological changes, but not have a clue what's caused it and can't link it to anything. And that's because the part of our brain that's taking in information to determine cues of safety or threat is taking that information in from our senses. And sometimes one of our senses might detect something that's below our level of consciousness. It could be a smell, for example. So you might have been in a workplace where you had a colleague who wore a perfume that was really recognisable, and you didn't have a good relationship with that person. And you might then be down shopping in a shop, walk into a shop where somebody wearing the same perfume has been. Your brain can detect that scent, but it's not so strong or obvious that you immediately go, oh, so-and-so used to wear that perfume and, oh, they were not a good person in my life. Yeah. But it can get detected at a level that we aren't consciously aware of. And we can have those reactions and be left a bit baffled as to, why on earth am I feeling like this? I'm just shopping for a new shirt in Country Road or, Target or, and I remember when our son was born, new mum, trying to work out what the heck was going on. I remember ringing Parent Line on occasion saying, I just don't know why he's crying. I've done everything. And she'd say, you know what? It doesn't matter. We don't always have to know, but we still know what to do. And I think that was a really good lesson. And I think that's really helpful when we think about anxiety as well.
It's so true. Oh, all right. I have to ask you this next question because I'm dying to find out myself, although you've shared a few already. Look, we know that you are on a mission to turn anxiety into resilience by supporting a lot of parents and teachers to raise happier and more relaxed, resilient and optimistic, flourishing kids. I'm just wondering, can you share your insights into how we can better understand how anxiety might show up in our bodies or our minds, and maybe some strategies or tools for our listeners today to draw on, when their anxiety might just not be serving us well?
Oh, yes, absolutely. To break it down, a really great way when we think about how anxiety shows up is we can think about how it affects how we think, how we feel, and what we do. And so perhaps what I might do is share the signs and the symptoms, and then maybe a strategy under each of those headings.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
So when it comes to the way we think, there is a lot of worry and a lot of catastrophic thinking. And so I grew up worrying about absolutely everything. So a kid with anxiety, classic, just constantly seeking reassurance about worries. And we often ask a lot of what if questions. What if this happens? What if that happens? And it's helpful to understand this from a couple of perspectives. We want control, we want certainty. And anxiety is completely driven wild by uncertainty, hence COVID being such a big problem. But also when our brain has detected a threat, and I say threat in talking marks, which nobody can see but us, but the brain will work hard to laser focus on that threat, to try to solve that problem, to sort of extinguish the threat. And that's why we can end up ruminating and just going round and round and round. And so worries and catastrophic thinking, what if questions, they are a really big part of the thinking side of anxiety. When it comes to how we feel, we can kind of break it down into two columns: how we feel emotionally and how we feel physically. So emotionally, we can get really teary, we can get very agitated, very irritable, angry, which is when we think about a fight or flight. The fight side can sometimes show up for people, and that defensiveness that can show up. And so big emotions are often something that we see with anxiety. When it comes to how we feel physically, we did talk about a few of those. We talk about the gut and the feeling sick in the tummy or sweating, because the brain's saying, hey, you're about to run for your life or fight to the death, hopefully not yours. You're going to get hot. I'm going to turn on the cooling. And so we sweat, we perspire, and for some that's a really early sign of anxiety. Muscle tension, because our muscles are preparing for battle or for running. We can get sort of spots in our vision because our vision becomes very laser focused on what the threat might be if it's in our environment. And we can sometimes get tingling or funny feelings in our limbs because we're flooded with adrenaline and we're being prepared to sort of be really powered up. And so the other thing that's really interesting is we have a lot of glucose dumped into our bloodstream so that we have a ready source of energy. And if we're, just as a little aside, I think this is really interesting side note, is that if we're under a lot of stress, regularly feeling anxious and stressed, our body will mobilize this glucose into the bloodstream. But then if we don't use it because we're just sitting at our computer, trying to reread an email that's made us feel a bit off, or we're lying in bed trying to sleep, then that sugar can ultimately get deposited as body fat, and particularly around our middle. And so that's a very interesting side note as to what can happen with us physically as well. So they are some of the signs and symptoms to look out for when it comes to sort of how we feel and the physiological changes. Racing heart, changes to our breathing, all with a view to powering us up so we can protect ourselves. And then the last is do. Anxiety really impacts what we do, and that's fundamentally avoidance. So it's what we don't do, actually. When we feel anxious about something, the brain will want us to stay safe, and often that means saying no to an invitation or to a speaking opportunity if that creates a lot of anxiety, or for kids, not wanting to separate from parents, saying no to camp or a sleepover. And also an inability to sit still, to concentrate. It really affects learning. In the classroom, we know that often kids who are anxious are around 12 months behind their peers because their brain is focused on a threat so often they just can't focus on what the teacher's saying. So that's a really good way to sort of think about looking for anxiety. I just want to add that it's a very normal feeling. Normally it rises and falls in a situation that requires us to be well prepared. So maybe for a test, it's natural to feel anxious, but the anxiety should settle after the test is over. Anxiety that's a problem, it's really getting in the way of life and it's extreme and frequent. That's kind of my anxiety. And so I think it's important to have that differentiation between the very normal variety and the variety that might be spilling over into a disorder. When it comes to strategies to manage under each of these headings, so when we come to thinking, a powerful skill to practice is the ability to notice what we're thinking first, because we can get swept away in our thoughts. But there's a part of us that can eventually notice, if you were watching a movie and you realised, I was daydreaming about going out for lunch tomorrow, and then you realise, bring your attention back to Netflix. The part of us that notices is our observer. And the first step to being able to manage anxious thinking is to be able to firstly notice what we're thinking. And a great strategy to use is a diffusion strategy where we might say, I notice I'm having the thought that, and then insert your worry next. So it could be, I've got a scrape on my leg, as I mentioned to you, and I'm having thoughts that it may become infected because it's very sore. So I notice I'm having the thought that this scrape might become infected. And I can notice that and I can go, is it helpful? Well, in this instance, it's one of the very few instances, yes, it is helpful, because if I'm noticing that, yes, it is a helpful thought because it's prompted me to make an appointment to see my GP to see if I might need some antibiotics. So that's a helpful thought. If I am having the thought that I've got a scrape on my leg, it's going to be infected and my leg is going to fall off, I can say, I notice I'm having the thought that my leg is going to fall off. Then I could ask myself, is that helpful? That's not helpful. What would be helpful is to following through with the plan, see the GP, get the antibiotics, and then refocus my attention on what's important right now, which is being here with you, having a lovely conversation. For a child who is worried after school because mum is late, that mum has died in a car accident, and these are the types of thoughts that anxious kids can have, the little one could learn to say, I notice I'm having the thought that mum's been in an accident. Yeah. Is it helpful? No. What could I do that's helpful? Focus on chatting with my friends who are also waiting for their late parents, And so these strategies with practice, and these are just introductions, are really powerful to putting some distance between you and what you're thinking. And it's actually one of the most helpful strategies that I've used with my own anxiety. So that's one particular thinking strategy. Another thinking strategy could be to give your mind a name. And if you name your mind, say, Jack, you could say, well, thanks, Jack. Thanks, Jack. Thank you for worrying. I'm okay. Thank you very much for looking out for me, but we're okay. I appreciate it. And it's just like I'm having thoughts. I'm not consumed by my thoughts. When it comes to how we feel, a couple of things really help. Movement is the natural end to the fight or flight response. So the body's expecting us to do something, fight or flee. So movement is really powerful. And that could be shooting hoops. It could be running on the spot. It could be, turning on some music and doing the nut bush, showing my age here. Or
we're with you, I think, on that.
Yes, I love the nut bush.
We can do it all at the end.
That's a really great thing to do, but also to, like you were saying, Leanne, that you teach mindfulness. Being present in the moment takes our mind off the threat back into the present moment where we can take action and do something that is in line with our values. We can actually do something meaningful in the moment. When it comes to avoidance only makes anxiety worse, and there are a number of reasons for that. And so it's helpful just to have the recognition that this avoidance and these ideas about saying I don't want to do something or pulling back or cancelling are happening because the brain is trying to protect you from something, and to recognise that we can take steps towards what is important to us, even if our anxiety has to come with us. Yeah. A lot of people will wait and say, I'll do that when I don't have anxiety anymore. I'll do that when I feel confident or I feel relaxed. And we can still do things that are important even when we're anxious. We absolutely can. And people like me have to do that all the time.
I love those.
You mentioned just before giving your mind a name, and in previous conversations we've talked about imposter syndrome, and I have a name for mine, which is Lucy, short for Lucifer.
Yeah.
but what I've noticed is that by having that awareness, the relationship has changed. So I know it's there and I have a strategy to work with it. It's not as powerful anymore. So I think that these strategies are wonderful because it gives you a sense of empowerment in, even though it's still there, it might not ever go. We might have it for the rest of our lives, but when we've got those ways to work with it, we're just empowered to meet it with a different experience and still function the best we can.
Yes, exactly. And it can be a little bit playful, like you said, it's Lucy's short for Lucifer, and it can be, well, hello, Lucy, you're back again. Here we go again. Have that kind of almost like a playful kind of monologue, because we think all day. We're constantly talking to ourselves and having thoughts. And to be able to do that, it puts it kind of more to the background. And so you can go, right, Lucy, hello. Same old stories coming up, but I'm not going to let you stand in front of me and block me and stop me. I'm going to deal with you. You can come along, but I'm going to get on with what I want to do regardless. And I absolutely love that. And recently I read a fantastic email from Seth Godin. He has a daily little blog that he sends out, and I'm one of millions on the mailing list. And he said, it was so powerful. Every now and again, something really strikes a chord with you.
Yeah.
And he said that if you're not feeling imposter syndrome, you always feel like you're ready. You feel confident that you always know what the outcome is going to be, then you're not pushing yourself enough. I thought, yes, it almost flips it, because we can go, right, well, am I cruising? Am I cruising? Yeah. And, cruising, great. But if we've got really important things we want to do, we want to have other things in our life other than cruising and waiting. We want to be able to go, yes, I have got these things, which means I am putting myself in a place where I'm challenging myself and I'm out of my comfort zone. And the same can be said of anxiety as well.
Yeah. And if, we are experiencing that uncomfortable feeling, we can understand, I like that Seth Godin approach, because when we are stepping outside of our comfort zone, it's normal to feel like that. So understanding that, it empowers us to just experience it in a way that, okay, it's there. Hello, anxiety.
We do a lot of work in school. So I work as a teacher in a primary school and with young children at the moment. And one of the things that we talk about is that comfort zone. So if you can't see, the listeners probably can't see, but you give yourself a hug when you're in the comfort zone and everything's just cruisy, it's easy, there's nothing that's going to challenge you at all. Then we want to be in the stretch zone, which is going to help our learning. So we put our hands on our shoulders, both hands, to show that we're stretching. And we talk about what that looks like. But then there's also a panic zone, which is the hands up on the head, we don't want to go there. And sometimes children will go from, and we talk about this with them, is that they can go from their comfort zone straight into their panic zone when it's something so new that they've gone too quickly. So then we talk about, well, how can you go from your panic zone either back into the stretch zone, or do you need to go back to your comfort zone and start again? So that conversation happens all the time. And I think we haven't really talked about that being, when there's separation anxiety. So I wonder we might explore a little bit further with that one. So thank you for raising that.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I've heard all of those terminologies before, but I've never heard them shared in that way. And I think that's very powerful. And I absolutely love that your precious children in your class have the opportunity to get those insights into themselves and to have that raised self-awareness, and also then the insight, oh, I think I've gone into my panic zone, and then what to do to bring themselves, whether that's breathing or that's using their senses or however it is that you support them to be able to do that. That's such a life skill for the classroom and right through life. So yeah, very, very
and the
powerful.
more they get to know that earlier, the more it becomes part of who they are, which is why we build it earlier. But to make you have a giggle about this, and Leanne, you'll love this. So sometimes when we do a quick check-in, where are you, as if they're just to check in, because some pretend that they're okay, but you can tell they're not. They'll be sweating and shaking and doing all sorts of things. And so they'll say, oh, just say, quick, where are you? And some people put one hand on their head, which means they're in their real panic zone, and one on their shoulder. I don't know if you can see me there.
Yes.
And so I get to give them feedback as well. So I might say to you, because they can have that agency in however they do it. And then I'll say, okay, so I can see that you're a little bit panicked, but you're also a little bit in your stretch zone. So I'm wondering what you need to do next. Does that make sense? And then they'll say, where do you need to go next to be able to move forward? And then they'll say, oh, maybe I need to quickly do here and then jump back to here. And they're so articulate in saying what they need, because they understand. And there's no, you have to do it. It's my question coaching back to them. I can see that you're here. So where do you need to go next? It's really beautiful. Very, very, very powerful.
It's so empowering for them, and it's helping them to develop, like you say, it's just a part of the way they operate, a part of the way they think, and to have that check-in, because if they've run late to school and they're a very diligent young person who just really hates being late, because that's very stressful for some children to be late, and they're feeling in their panic zone because something went wrong in the morning, and that to come back into that comfort zone and to know that that's almost like a pathway for them back into learning. And also after recess and lunch, some kids are so wired that to be able to come from playing tiggy at recess or playing soccer or whatever it is that's been really energetic, or maybe they've had an issue at recess or lunch where they felt excluded and they're not feeling good, to be able to then come back into the classroom. And when you did the hands across the chest, one of the things that, I don't know if you've seen this before, what I'm doing is I'm doing the alternate patting. So I've got my hands crossed on my chest like a bit of a hug, but I'm just doing alternate patting. And that can be very, very calming for the nervous system as well. And you've no doubt used that before, Lisa. And just these powerful self-care strategies and this awareness for people and for adults as well, because so many adults are just going through life in the panic zone and not even having a moment to stop and think, what do I need? And that rest is not a reward, that when we can rest and settle our nervous system and reset, we recharge, we're way more better at whatever it is that we're trying to power through. A little bit of time out can recharge us and help us be much more productive if that's what we need, or present.
Something we are discovering in our conversations is that we as humans experience anxiety in different ways, and this is part of being human. But when anxiety shows up, it's our mindsets that either help us or hinder us in our response. Can you help us understand how, although anxiety is not a choice, it doesn't have to take over?
Yeah, I think to understand that it's a very natural part of life, and that everybody every single person experiences anxiety almost every single day. And it might be that somebody slams a door and that you startle and that your brain detects a threat, and then quickly you realise, oh, somebody's slamming the door again. Or, you know, there could be a car backfiring, or there could be just a notion that, oh, I've got to make a phone call that's awkward. And there can be, and we can dip, you know, I often refer to polyvagal theory, where it's a bit like a traffic light system. So if listeners can picture sort of 3 big rectangles sitting on top of one another, the top one's red, the middle one's yellow, and the bottom one's green. When they're in the green zone, we're in a really beautiful space for connection with other people, for engagement with learning, engagement in conversations. And that's when our nervous system is in parasympathetic control. If you picture like a little ripply wave sort of dipping from green to yellow, from green to yellow, from green to yellow, sort of we dip in and out of yellow during the day. We go into fight or flight, we settle back down. We go into fight or flight. But it's all very normal, because normal anxiety rises and falls in response or in anticipation of a stress or a threat. And then we resolve that, then it settles back down. And so I think it's really good to know that it's completely normal, to know when it might be getting out of hand, but also know that anxiety is protective when we can understand it and have some strategies in our toolkit to recognise it when it's bubbling up, settle it back down, and use our thinking skills as well. Then we can refocus our attention on doing something that's important to us. And that's a really values-aligned activity. And so if we know what matters, and I'll give you an example. A teenager studying for a maths test, feeling really anxious about it, in the middle of studying at home, throws their hands in the air, walks away, can't do it, maths is horrible. This is just all too hard. Right? In that moment, very anxious about the upcoming test. They've gone into fight or flight. And so first thing that a parent can do is to really empathise and just say, oh, gosh, I can see you're having a really hard time with this right now. And even maybe sort of say, look, I know what it's like to really struggle with something like this. I've been where you are. I know it's really hard. And just to validate everything for them. And and then when they've been validated, that immediately starts to settle. And you can even name it to tame it. Oh gosh, sounds to me like you're feeling really anxious at the moment. How does that sound? Does that feel like a pretty good fit? Help them really name the emotion that they're having. And then you can sort of sit with them and let them experience it, because, hey, it's not dangerous to feel anxiety. It's not dangerous to feel negative emotions. You don't have to run away from them. So sitting and not necessarily comforting as in reassuring, but just being a stable, beautiful, validating presence with them while they're feeling anxious. And then thinking, all right, well, how can we get you out of your head and into your body? What can we do to sort of move this anxiety, sort of get some movement happening and bring them back into the present? And then the next part is, well, all right, what do we need to do now? What's the most important thing right now? And the most important thing is getting back to the maths, because it's the preparation and the practice that will help to prepare you, and then that'll help ultimately to settle the anxiety about the upcoming test. You'll feel more prepared. And so that's a little sequence that happens over a period of time, maybe 5 or 6 or 7, 8 minutes. But what matters is refocusing on what's important in this moment and get back on with that. And that's how we can kind of live with the anxiety and really be able to move forward, even though the anxiety might be, something that pops up frequently. Being able to go through that process enables a person to eventually go, right, well, what's important now? What do I need to put my attention on, and what steps can I take to move forward?
I really love that. As we come towards the end of our podcast, we're just wondering, based on our conversations today, along with your own books, we will put those into the show notes for our listeners as well. But do you have a book or a podcast, TED Talk, app, or something that you might recommend for our listeners today?
Oh, gosh. Speaking of TED Talks, my whole body just goes into complete fight or flight every time. I would love to do a TED Talk one day myself. I think it's a dream for a lot of people. Yes. Thank you, gorgeous Lisa. I would love to recommend, if I may, my own podcast for listeners. It's something I'm really proud of. I started it with a lot of anxiety because it's funny, I can speak in front of 1,000 people on a stage. Something about, and I wonder if you guys felt the same, something about recording yourself and putting something out there that's evergreen. People can rewind, they can go back and listen. Just the anxiety about that vulnerability, I think, was huge. And I talked about my journey with that in the podcast as well. But what I love about the podcast is it's for not only people who struggle with anxiety themselves, but for teachers and parents. There's something to take from the different episodes. And just this morning, I was on a Zoom meeting with somebody who I work with for my business. And she said, you won't believe it. She said she had checked in on a friend who has lost her husband, and she's the family obviously going through a difficult time. And the friend said, my daughter's anxiety has been extremely high. She's been really struggling with the death of her dad, and it's been really difficult. And she said to my friend who I work with, she said, but you know what I've been doing? I've been listening to this podcast called Well, Hello, Anxiety. And she said, it has been such a wonderful support for us. And then Kathy said, Jodi's my friend, and I was going to suggest you listen. And so really the feedback I'm getting is telling me that it's really helpful. So thank you for inviting me to share that, and just to have an opportunity to invite people to have a listen in and see if it might be the right fit for you.
Thank you so much. Jodi, I'm sure that people will be very interested in everything that we've talked about today. And if they wanted to reach out to you to find out more or connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can find out more about me at drjodirichardson.com, DRJODI, Richardson.com. And I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. So, yes, if listeners would like to connect with me through any of those channels, that would be wonderful.
And Jodi, we've finished off our podcast with all of our guests about asking you if you have a favourite self-care strategy from your own wellbeing toolkit that you might be currently drawing on that you think that our listeners would love.
Oh, yes. I usually answer this by talking about my love of exercise and how much a part of my life that is. But I've recently been, and that's a huge thing for me, but what I'd really love to just share with you and with listeners today is what I've been doing with my digital habits, because our digital devices are just such an all-consuming part of our life if we're not careful with them. And I really want to live. It's easy. We can very easily turn to our phone when we're anxious for a distraction, and that's an avoidance strategy. Whether or not we reach to, I don't know if this happens to you, but I might reach for my phone to pick up to text a friend, and all of a sudden I'm in Instagram. I'm like, how did that happen? I don't know how that happened. It's just like this automatic kind of, and so here are some of the things that I've been doing to minimize my device use and to be more cautious and conscious about what I'm using my devices for. I have set a 10-minute timer in Instagram. So if I pop in to answer, respond to comments on posts or to do a post or something, and I find myself scrolling because there are 1,000 engineers on the other side of our devices wanting to keep us hooked. After 10 minutes, a little pop-up comes up that says, would you like to close it? And so I'm like, oh, hello. Yes, I would like to close it. All devices are out of bedrooms at home. At the end of the day, I like to leave my device away from where I can see it, because even just being able to see it can distract our attention. Having it beside us in bed means we don't sleep as soundly. And what else have I done around devices? I think I'm just much more conscious about not touching my device or not having my device available or around or even within eyesight when I'm in the presence of other people, no matter who they are. So, I mean, I don't, like everyone, I feel the pull of the devices, and I felt that it's been a habit that's really needed some more friction points. I get that term from the wonderful Dr. Christy Goodwin. She has a real way with words. If we put more friction between us and our devices, then we will minimise our time on them. And we know that the research is very, very clear about how they affect not only our mental health, but also obviously our attention, our memory, and our general experience of life, because life is not lived by staring at a screen. And so there's some of the things that I've been doing to really care for my own physical and mental health, and also just to really sort of get a handle on something that can get out of control quickly if we are not careful.
Easily, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. They're really relevant at the moment, I think, for so many people. So I think our listeners will appreciate that and trial out a few others. Which is
Jodi, is there an app for the Instagram? You mentioned there's a timer that comes up. How do you do that?
Oh, I did that in my settings in Instagram.
Oh, I'm going to do it now.
Okay.
I love that too.
Yes, it's been absolutely fantastic, because they are designed with, the Persuasive Design Lab that was started by BJ Fogg, I think it was back at Stanford. He really wanted these persuasive technologies to be used for good. But, there are, as we know through some of the shows that we've seen on Netflix and the like, there are people who are quitting their jobs, working for Facebook, working for Twitter, working for Google, because they just don't like the way that these technologies are going in terms of trying to capture us. Things like the infinite scroll. The infinite scroll, it's this, we never feel like we've had enough. You read a newspaper, eventually the newspaper comes to an end. You pick up a magazine, eventually you've read the last article, or, eyed off the last, tip for hairstyles or new handbags or shoes, whatever it is that you're interested in. So the infinite scroll is one of these strategies that keeps us hooked. So we're in this state of insufficiency. The idea that it's a curated feed that sends us, based on what we've even stared at for a few extra seconds on Instagram or Facebook, the feed gets curated to send us more posts, particularly in our news feeds and the like, that will be more what's the word I'm looking for? Not offensive, but more likely to irritate us. So because we have a negativity bias, as you would both well understand, and that there can also be that sending you articles that have feed your confirmation bias. And so if you have an opinion, you'll just keep getting sent things that really reinforce that opinion, so we don't get a really balanced view of what's happening in the world. And, the blue light, we know, really affects our melatonin, and which can delay our onset of sleep. And sleep is just incredibly important and really routinely sacrificed. It's such a strong biological need. But for all of those reasons, the more I read about it and learn, the more I realise I don't want to be a slave to the device.
Yeah.
I want it to be, sticking with the metaphor, a slave to me, for use when I want to use it, and not to be sort of sucked in all the time. Yeah. So they're very cleverly designed, and it's very, very hard as an individual to make a stance against what the persuasive technology is luring us to do. So it's really nice to have the opportunity to share some of that here with you and your listeners today.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, and we're very grateful for all of the things that you've shared with us, and hopefully our listeners will be thinking a little bit more about what anxiety is, how it's showing up, but also what they can do about it when it is there. That it doesn't have to, you can live with anxiety and actually thrive, like you say.
You absolutely can. It's been such a pleasure. I'm so grateful that you invited me to speak with you both. It's just, I've just thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's been a really lovely opportunity.
Oh, thank you. We are grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you both.
What a conversation. I'm sure there are going to be people who are listening to this or have listened to this and say, that's what it is. Or, okay, now I have some tools to work with this. And Dr. Jodi was so generous in providing some wonderful strategies that are going to be very helpful.
Absolutely. And I think my head was going around immediately, not just for myself or for other people that I know who have anxiety, but just for those who, like at school, for example, for me, I work with a lot of children who have separation anxiety, and a whole lot of anxieties about learning, but also avoidance. So I think now I feel like I have more strategies to talk to the children about that, and parents as well. And I think hopefully that, the people who are listening to this will also identify that for themselves, or other people that they're there, even just approaching as a parent. That really stood out for me. And I love the little piece about, I noticed that and you talk about what it is.
Yes.
And then you've got to, these just small things that will help. I really love that.
And I loved how she brought everything into a concise package around what the experience of anxiety might be like, that think, feel and do.
Yeah.
I think that helps to explain it so much better to others, and really helped put into perspective how we might feel emotionally or physically, what we might do, such as avoiding things.
I really liked when she talked about the traffic light sort of system.
Yes.
Of, being in that green zone where it's, everything's going well, but then the yellow, it's starting to go up a little bit, and the red is where we're really having those catastrophic thinking. But that it ebbs and flows. So you may have one experience where it's like that for the day, but often once you become more aware, you may have other ones there that you can start to become, again, more aware of things that are happening, and then what you need to do to get back to into that green zone. I really like that. But also the one big thing I thought was really valuable for people to hear is that anxiety is that those physical things that are happening in your body, it's because our bodies are so wired from, thousands, millions and millions of years ago, where we've got the fight, flight, but also the freeze response. And so when we start having conversations about that, then it's easier to put strategies in place that might suit you. You understand that a little bit more. So, when I get on stage and I have to talk, I get the sweaty hands immediately. I noticed that the other day when I had to do a really tricky thing, and I thought, my hands are really sweaty. It was so subtle, but it was there.
Yeah.
And for me, that was like, I didn't need to fight. It was more of a freeze response. But I know, that flight where you want to run away, you just don't want to be there. Understanding what's happening inside your body is fantastic. That was a big one for me.
Oh, wow. Another great conversation.
Yeah.
I just love these conversations that we're having.
Yeah, and our beautiful humans, aren't they?
Yeah.
All right, well, bye for now.
Bye.
And thank you for listening to the Imperfect Us podcast. As always, we are extremely grateful to our executive producer, Brenton Ainsworth, for helping us to put this episode together. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone you care about, and we would be grateful if you could rate this podcast on iTunes. To continue the conversation and see what we're up to, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. Just search for Imperfect Us. Bye for now.